Long gone are the days of waiting to be seen in a doctor's office only to have that awkward conversation with your healthcare provider. WISP gives you access to sexual and reproductive healthcare from the comfort of your home. Get treatment for BV, yeast infections, UTIs, and much more delivered directly to your home or ready for pickup at your local pharmacy in less than 3 hours. The best part? WISP is discreet, convenient, and you don't need medical insurance to receive care or prescription medication. Visit us today at hellowisp.com.
I'm Debbie Reber, and you're listening to Tilt Parenting, a podcast for parents raising neurodivergent kids in a strength-based, neurodiversity-affirming way. And before I get to today's guest, a heads up that starting next week, you will notice this show will have an updated name. After 9 years, I am renaming this podcast from Tilt Parenting to Full Tilt Parenting because this journey that we're on is not passive. It really asks everything of us. And I'm really excited about this new name because it reflects the intentional way we show up for our neurodivergent kids every day. And it really honors the full contact, full-hearted reality of our parenting lives. And you don't have to do anything different. Nothing else will change in terms of how and where you listen to this show. So next week, you'll be listening to Full Tilt Parenting. But for today, I have a really interesting show for you about the topic of consent. My guest for this conversation is educator and consent expert Sarah Casper. She's the founder of Comprehensive Consent and the author of the Kids and Consent curriculum. And Sarah has taught thousands of children and teens and adults how to build healthy, respectful, and joyful relationships through a social-emotional lens. So in this episode, we're going to talk about how consent begins in everyday moments, like respecting boundaries and making choices, and how this plays out differently with neurodivergent kids. We're also going to dig into practical ways to introduce consent language at home and balance autonomy with safety. Plus, Sarah shares a simple activity to help your family reflect on how decisions are made. So here is my conversation with Sarah Casper on consent. Hey, Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, it's great to be here.
I'm looking forward to getting into this with you, a new conversation, a new topic for the show. But before we do that, I read your formal bio, but I always ask my guests to take a few minutes and introduce themselves in their own words. And I always want to know that personal why.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Sarah Casper, and I am a consent educator. And I like to specify when I say that I very much deal in the realm of social emotional learning and creating healthy relationships, and not in terms of legalities. How I got to this work, it's truly reflective of that. When I started to learn about boundaries and asking for what I want and navigating power dynamics, it was in the acro yoga space, which is like partnered acrobatics. I really had to figure out that space in a specific way because I am a 5'3" woman and I weigh about 170 pounds. And so in an acrobatic space, there is not that like prototype for me, right? The prototype is either a very small and lightweight woman and a very big, strong man basing. And so when I first started doing this circus art back in 2017, I really feel like I lost my voice as someone who's typically a confident, outspoken person. Boundaries didn't feel like something that were hard for me, but all of a sudden in this space where it was so assumed that because I looked a certain way, I wouldn't be good at certain things or I should do certain things, I really had to find my voice. And it was through the practice of trying out different ways of asking and different ways of saying no and talking to my friends who also were doing it with me and having issues with boundaries and wants. And so it really comes from a place of creating things you want more than limiting yourself in things you don't want. Those are like two sides of the same coin, but it really comes from how do we get to do the things that we want to do? And in doing so, kind of keep away what we don't want to do. And I was like, wow, this is a skill that I learned through practice. As an adult, imagine if I could have practiced consent in a low stakes way, not having to do with sex when I was younger. That would be amazing. And I've seen how these skills have also transferred then into a sexual realm, but it really didn't start from that place. It came from a place of just myself and my body learning to ask for what I want and keep my boundaries when it was something I didn't want.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I mean, even for myself in my 50s, like I'm working on this stuff. I'm learning to set healthy boundaries and like grappling with what does that look like. And these are such important skills that we're talking about. So I love that your personal experience brought you into this space and that now you are sharing it with other people. Let's start with the definition. You kind of defined consent and said it's partially like, what do I want? Not just what do I not want, which I think is such a cool way to talk about it. But how would you define this bigger umbrella of comprehensive consent, which is really the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I don't actually define consent because I really like the idea of keeping the word consent and the idea of getting consent and giving consent in the legal realm. Of it is a binary. It is one or the other. And right, that's how courts work. You decide it did meet criteria for this or it didn't. And I'm not a lawyer. My background's in psychology. This is not my space. But what I can talk about is the practice of consent. And for that, I define it as the practice of navigating your boundaries and desires alongside the boundaries and desires of someone else. So it's the interplay of what you want and what you don't want, and the interplay of what they want and they don't want.
That's a great definition. I also just want to mention for listeners that I was talking with Sarah about this before I hit record, but I learned of your work because I interviewed Dr. Devin Price recently about his second book, Unmasking for Life. And your reference throughout that book, and I know that your work was really informative as he was researching that. So that really piqued my interest. And so when we talk about this idea of that interplay and practicing what you want within the intersection of what other people want and navigating all of those things, I'd love to know, why is this such an important social emotional skill for young people to learn?
Yeah, I think it's one of the bedrocks of healthy relationships, being able to share with someone what you are wanting to do, what you are willing to do, and what would feel like enduring to you, and being able to notice in your body what feels like wanting, willing, and enduring. And these are terms that I learned from Betty Martin, who created the Wheel of Consent. And as I said before, like consent is sometimes shaped as a binary of want and don't want. But really, there's things that you like are excited to do and want to do, things that you're willing to do, like okay with, and then what you would be enduring and would be not okay with. And that's a big space in between of what you're willing to do. And you want relationships where there's a good balance of things that you're wanting to do, things that you're willing to do, and trying to keep enduring out of the equation. And having skilled in consent in navigating your boundaries and desires alongside those of someone else is how you make sure that you stay in those realms that you want to stay in, and that people don't feel resentful, and that people are getting those benefits out of relationships.
Yeah. I mean, as you're talking, of course, like I want to pivot, but I'm not going to, but I am going to tell you the question that I want to come back to is I'm just thinking about a lot of our listeners have kids who are pretty demand avoidant and who would identify as having a PDA profile of autism. And so then I think about this idea of so much probably of what they're being asked to do is something that feels like they would have to endure it, right? They're probably butting up against that a lot. So I want to come back to that because I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on that. But I was wondering if you could talk with us about, if we think about what consent might look like with younger kids, for example, and I'll throw an example out there, even in terms of our kids knowing that they don't have to give hugs to relatives. I think there's so much of what we do with really young children in terms of how we engage with them that doesn't respect their bodily autonomy. And I'm just wondering if you could give us some examples about what this looks like when we're talking about maybe young kids to start.
Yeah, I've played with a lot of different definitions of consent, and one of them has been in the past, like it's the practice of upholding bodily autonomy. I think consent extends outside bodies, but it definitely is a way that we uphold that. We figure out what people are okay with and not okay with. So one way, as you said, is like hugging or giving affection to relatives, helping them understand that they don't have to do that. Affection ideally is coming from a place that's real. And also having a conversation with them that like, are you willing to give grandma a hug? And if you're not willing, that's also okay. But that they don't have to want to do it in order to do it, but they can give it as a gift to grandma if it's not outside of their boundaries. And in any of these scenarios, what a parent needs to really be careful about is using the language of willing, but really pushing for enduring. So are you sure you're not willing? Come on, please, you can be willing. Like, you can be willing. And it's like, nope, now you're not asking them about that genuine piece, right? But this comes up with young children. It comes up with a lot of physical safety things, like holding hand while crossing the street, being in booster seats or car seats, diaper changes, where what I will often say to parents is that bodily autonomy is not my highest value and is a value of mine, and it is not the highest value. So if you say like, hey, for your safety, I need to either be holding you or holding your hand while we cross the street, they might be really upset and saying like, my body, my choice, and saying safety is more important here. I hear that you don't want me to, and like, I don't want to be doing something you don't want to do. And as the person who's in charge of protecting you, this is what we have to do. And not saying, no, it's not your body, it's not your choice, but recognizing that, yeah, right now, two values are conflicting. And this one is a higher one, but really having awareness for yourself, for like accountability's sake, that you are violating their body boundaries. You're doing it for a good reason, but you are doing it. And before going there, giving them as much choice within those decisions, right? You don't want to hold my hand. Okay. Will you get in the stroller while we cross the street? I can pick you up. That's another option, right? If your body is able to do that and you won't be, enduring, right? Give them other options. You can make it more playful of like, oh, let's skip across the street. Let's bunny hop across the street, whatever it is. Try to get them to a place where they are genuinely willing. But like, yep, sometimes like I don't value pain, but I do value immunizations. And so I'm going to choose that one over the other.
Interesting. Okay, let's take a quick break and then we'll dive into some more concepts on consent.
As the warm weather is here, my closet is calling to me and requesting a refresh. I'm also being very intentional about buying things that look great while being multifunctional. And that's why I love Quince. Their clothes are timeless, lightweight, and feel so much more elevated than anything else I've found at this price point. Quince offers everyday luxe items at fair prices. Think 100% European linen shorts and dresses starting at $30, beautifully made swimwear, and Italian leather platform sandals that feel like a splurge without the splurge. The best part? Everything with Quince is half the cost of similar brands. By working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middlemen, Quince gives you luxury without the markup. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. My favorite recent grab is an organic cotton gauze tiered maxi dress that I bought for a getaway with one of my besties. I'm traveling light, so I love that it's so lightweight, easy to pack, and totally versatile. Perfect with sandals or sneakers, and so comfy. Give your summer closet an upgrade with Quince. Go to quince.com/tilt for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/tilt to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/tilt. In recent years, my sleep has been impacted by a little issue with temperature regulation. Perhaps you can relate. Plus, my hub is essentially a portable furnace, and so between that and the warmer summer weather, I'm definitely in need of cooler comfort. Boll & Branch's best-selling Percale sheets are the antidote for getting overheated during sleep. They're made with a special cooling weave in the finest 100% organic cotton. These sheets feel crisp to the touch, breathable to sleep in, and offer cool comfort that lasts all night, even for the sweatiest of sleepers. So yes to all of that. I've also just ordered a signature hemmed sheet set from Boll & Branch because I've been hearing about how these sheets are buttery soft from the start, made from the finest 100% organic cotton, and somehow get even softer with every wash. I can't wait to try those. And one of the things I appreciate most about Boll & Branch is their money-back guarantee. You can try their sheets for a whole month, wash them, sleep in them, risk-free. And if you're not getting your best sleep ever, you can return them for a full refund. Feel the difference an extraordinary night's sleep can make with Boll & Branch. Get 15% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com/tilt. That's Boll & Branch, BOLLAND branch.com/tilt to save 15%. Exclusions apply. See site for details. I recently shared a story with my community about how I got through a particularly challenging 48 hours with some dysregulated family members without getting triggered myself. And the fact that I was able to stay grounded the whole time was a huge win for me, and I know that it helped my family out too. I've been really working on tending to my own nervous system lately, so I know that made a big difference this time. And Calm has been a key tool for me in working toward this goal. Calm is the #1 app for sleep and meditation, giving you the power to calm your mind and change your life. Calm offers a simple and powerful way to proactively tend to our mental and emotional health with things like meditations to ease anxiety, improve focus, or build healthy habits. There's soothing music, sleep stories, and guided relaxation exercises. It even features expert-led talks to help you handle grief, improve self-esteem, improve relationships, and more. Calm is like having a support system right in your pocket. Just a few minutes a day can make a real difference. And Calm makes it easy to find what you need whenever you need it. Calm has an exclusive offer just for listeners of our show. Get 40% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/tilt. This is an amazing value. Go to calm.com/tilt for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. Calm.com/tilt. And tell Calm you heard about them from me.
I just have to say, I really love the examples that you shared. And I think, gosh, it's tying together so many different things that we've talked about on the show here about raising free people, raising kids who know that they deserve to be respected. And I think for a lot of parents, maybe it's a generational thing, but I mean, this certainly isn't the way that my generation was raised by our parents. And so I imagine that talking about these concepts can be controversial sometimes. Has that been your experience?
There's definitely pushback. Some of it comes from it doesn't feel fair that they're getting choice as kids when I didn't. And power is enticing. And so when you're a parent, you're finally the person in power. And so some of it comes from that place. I would suggest to a parent who's feeling that to think about what their relationship to power is and power over versus power with. And then for some parents, and this could also be, it's not a binary, they could be a mix. For some parents, it's more of, I don't feel like I have the energy to do this. Yelling and forcing and being scary or whatever is so much quicker and mentally easier. In order to do a lot of these practices, you need to, as a parent, be somewhat regulated yourself. That is effortful often. So with those parents, that is honestly my suggestion is, before you think about implementing any of the strategies of giving choice, talking about willing, wanting, enduring, before doing any of that, find regulation within yourself and then try the strategies. And it will feel likely at least a little bit less effortful and draining. And also remember, going back to one of the skills of consent is, again, like accountability. So if you do find yourself being a little more forceful or power over than you'd like to be, is coming back and saying, hey, I was really stressed right there. I was short with you and that wasn't fair just because I'm bigger and I'm the parent and I'm sorry that I said those things or I raised my voice, etc. And that's part of, again, that relationship building where it's not just about did you or did you not get consent, but how are you recognizing that they, as you said, have the right to be free people and have their own boundaries and wants.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different threads that we talk about on the show that what you're sharing is weaving through, right? This idea of Dr. Ross Greene's work in collaborative and proactive solutions, right? It's about collaborating with our kids to help them solve problems, right? It is a much different approach than my way or the highway, or I make the rules. We talk a lot about self-regulation here as well and how critical that is so we can co-regulate for our kiddos who are having a hard time. And one of the things I just want to touch upon, I wrote down the word agenda, and I was just thinking that we can't really be doing this work in an authentic way if we go into conversations with our kids with an agenda of what we want the outcome to be of that situation. Am I getting that right?
That's such an interesting question. It is very hard to not have an agenda. And I don't even necessarily think that an agenda in general is necessarily a bad thing. I think an agenda of, I want you to do this way for me is an agenda we wouldn't want to go in with. But the agenda of, I want to get you in the car so that we can go to school, that's a fine agenda to enter the conversation with. What's important then within that is it doesn't matter how they get in the car, right? It matters that they're wearing their seatbelts and all of that, but it doesn't matter how they do it. It doesn't necessarily matter. It depends on the situation. If they get their shoes on before they get in the car or after, right? Once they're already seated. And if it's about they don't like where they're going, well, that's not an issue of getting in the car, right? That's an issue of the ultimate destination, which is school, which maybe they're having trouble in school. And so problem solving for the car isn't going to get you there. And actually, if you do creative strategies for like how you want to get into the car, it's really not likely going to work because we haven't really named the problem. So to some degree, I don't know how a parent would be able to keep themselves from having an agenda of, I want you to get in the car. You can try to tell yourself you don't, but deep down, you know you do. And also what I say to parents sometimes is, can you be honest with your child about why you're telling them to do what you want them to do? So like the idea of giving them two options, right? We can bunny hop to the car, pretend we're rocket ships. If they're going to say, well, that's not really choice, and be like, no, it's not. I do want to get you to the car. And I'm just saying, why not have fun with it? Right? If you can honestly say that to your kid, then I don't think, is there some kind of manipulation there? Yes, but you can be straight up honest with it. And their kid would be like, oh, okay. But if you're yelling at your child and saying, right, my way or the highway because I said so, and you don't really have a good reason for why you're making them do the thing the way, right? You have to put your shoes on first because I said so, and because your feet are going to get dirty and whatever. And you can sometimes catch yourself where you think there's a good reason. And then your kid shares, here's why actually I can solve for that. And then you say, okay, you're right. I didn't think about it. You're right. If you wear your, outdoor shoes to there, then yep, that's totally fine. You can start going down the here is why you have to do it my way. And I do have an agenda. There might be, right, again, a good reason for why some kid has to do something in a certain way, but being able to pivot if the child gives you new information. I had parents say to me, well, like, but I don't want them to win. And I was like, oh, so that's a different thing, right? That's a power over thing. That's a yep. Because I said to them, I was like, well, why can't they do it that way? They're like, well, because then they win. And I think especially once you've had some conflict within a decision, it can be really easy to stay on that path because you feel like you want to win. But remembering like winning is teaching creative problem solving to your kid and maintaining the relationship. Like that's what a real win looks like. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask you one more question, then we'll take a break. And then I want to talk more specifically about neurodivergent kids. But you've explained that a lot of consent for kids is having a sense of agency and choice. And we've talked about the younger kids, getting in the car, putting on shoes, those kinds of examples. Could you give us an example of maybe more of a elementary school or a middle school student of the kinds of things we might want to be considering when it comes to consent, a different situation?
Yeah. Something like taking a shower on their own, right? You're making me shower. It's my body. I don't need to. And I like to separate the categories of hygiene, health, and safety, right? Sometimes something is a hygiene issue, which is not a health issue. And sometimes those things get conflated, right? Not brushing your teeth one night might be a hygiene issue, not a dentist, but I'm pretty certain that that's not a health issue for one night. And so keeping those kinds of things in mind. So if your kid doesn't shower for one day, okay, so it's a hygiene issue. They smell bad, right? Also social at that point, social stuff will take care of that, right? You don't need to be the parent to say shower because their friends will encourage some of those behaviors, right? When it becomes to be a health issue or a safety issue, that's when you'd want to have a conversation. You might have a conversation about hygiene too, but I think I recommend to parents to be more flexible on those issues. I also I know there's some controversy, or do we call them natural consequences? Do we call them practical consequences? But right, if they don't want to do their homework, okay, I'm not going to make you do your homework. You deal with the teacher when your homework isn't done. It depends on the kind of student, right? Or who the kid is. That's not a one size fits all strategy, but sometimes letting them choose course and find out what the consequences are can be helpful. But again, are they not doing their homework because they want to goof off? Are they not doing their homework because they are having a hard time focusing and need support in creating an environment? Are they not doing their homework because they don't understand it and feel embarrassed? I think a lot of parents go, no, you have to do this, especially at that age where they can start to share a little bit more about how they're thinking and feeling, wider vocabulary, wider understanding of what's going on. You might say to them like, yeah, why not? Like, what's going on for you? And figure out first, like, why they don't want to before you jump to problem solving of no, but you have to because it's your homework. One of my favorite examples of that is that I have said before, and I'll say it again, that I with years did not brush my teeth as a child. I told my parents that I did. I wet my toothbrush. I did all the tricks and I did not brush my teeth. It was not because I didn't think about the consequences of the health of my gums and teeth and I am paying for it now. It's because I was a kid and thinking about future me wasn't something I was focused on. What I was focused on was that brushing my teeth was boring. I had to be away from the fun and brushing my teeth. And now I watch TikTok while I brush my teeth. And I do it every night. And it was because the problem wasn't that I didn't understand the importance of it. The problem was that I was bored and that I was distracted. And so now I do something where it makes it less distracting. And so that's a very practical example of, instead of going for but you have to, let me explain to you why. It's, all right, let's try some different ways of brushing teeth and figure out, is it the toothpaste? Is it the environment? Is it the time of day? Is it whatever? And also within that, I would say small wins. So if your kid is never brushing their teeth or never showering, and then all of a sudden you can get them to do that without conflict, right? If it's showering, let's say twice a week, they're doing that. That's a win, right? For brushing their teeth, they're doing it for 10 seconds every other day. Take that win and build on that rather than trying to go for perfection.
Yes, absolutely. We talk about this. Listeners know that I'm a big fan of Ned Johnson and Bill Stixrud's book. It's called The Self-Driven Child. And one of the things in talking about that book too, and that I remind myself every day, is I cannot make another person do anything, right? And especially as our kids get older. And I will also just say, later today, I'm interviewing Dr. David Yeager, who wrote this wonderful book called 10 to 25, The Science of Motivating Young People. And so there's a lot of what you're talking about that weaves nicely with that book too. I just love how all these themes are so connected. Let's take a quick break. And then I want to hone in specifically on some of the realities for consent and neurodivergent kids.
I used to think one's metabolism was this fixed thing. You either had a fast one or a slow one, and that was that. Now I know that actually it's possible to improve our metabolic health, which matters because optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and better sleep. If you've ever wished you had a simple way to understand what your body actually needs to feel better, you should check out Lumen. Lumen is the first handheld device that measures your metabolism through your breath and gives you daily personalized guidance for nutrition, workouts, sleep, and more. Just one breath each morning gives you real-time insight so you can fuel your body in the way it actually needs. I'm not going to lie, I am really into my Lumen device, and I will admit I'm a data and a research nerd, but I have found it super interesting to see how things like what and when I eat, how I slept, whether or not I fuel up before a workout, how all those things impact my metabolism. And this knowledge has helped me be more intentional about when and what I eat, which has helped my metabolism become more flexible over time, and that has definitely helped me feel just better overall. The warmer months are coming. Spring back into your health and fitness. Go to lumen.me/tilt to get 10% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/tilt for 10% off your purchase. And thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is sponsored by Friskies, who would like to tell your cats hi. Now, if that didn't get your cat's attention, there is one thing that always does the trick. Just pour some Friskies crunchy food in the bowl and you'll hear those paws come running. Works every time. With so many Friskies choices, you can always bring your cats running from their secret napping spots. There's always more to explore. See for yourself at friskies.com or visit your local store.
I'd love to just pivot and talk specifically about neurodivergent kids and teens. As I was learning about your work, I certainly can think of how being neurodivergent could create some additional challenges when it comes to consent. And then I also thought there are some ways in which some neurodivergent kids might be better prepared at setting boundaries. And I'm just wondering if you could give us some bigger picture thoughts on what you've noticed when it comes to that intersection of neurodivergence and consent in kids.
It's hard to pinpoint because as someone who has ADHD myself, a lot of the frameworks I've created and ways of talking about consent that I've created are with neurodivergence in mind, because that's how my brain works. And before I was doing consent work, that's often the populations I was working with. And you mentioned before, like demand avoidance. And like, that's, again, I touched on that before, of if they just want to have it their way, like at some point it's like, okay, like, do I really need to win, quote unquote, this one? Or is this not the time and place? I think like as adults and in a world where like logic reigns, or where we're told logic reigns, it can be really easy to want to explain to a kid why they need to ask first, why they need to apologize if they took something without asking, when that is a great thing to do, but not in the moment where they're frustrated about either getting it wrong or not being able to do the thing that they wanted to do. So I just often talk about like, these are skills that you want to talk about and build outside of difficult moments, not waiting for a difficult moment to arise and then use that right there to explain it to them, because they're offline. They're not going to hear what you're saying.
You talked at the very beginning that you see your work as kind of social emotional learning, right? And thinking about neurodivergent kids who may not read social cues in typical ways, I'm just wondering, what have you seen in terms of challenges that might bring up with maybe setting their own boundaries or recognizing the boundaries of other people?
Something that I share in general, and not just with neurodivergent communities, is the idea that we are really good at reading body language, and that doesn't always convert into knowing wants. What I mean by that is if you see someone shivering, you can tell by their body language, perhaps, that they're cold. And that's a pretty solid assumption. But that doesn't mean that therefore they want you to put their arms around them. That doesn't mean that they want you to close the window. Or it doesn't necessarily mean they want to borrow your sweatshirt, right? The feeling that they're feeling, you might be right about that, but you don't know then what their want is. And so I talk about incorporating body language rather than relying on it. And for folks who maybe struggle to read body language, focusing not on what is their body language saying, but noticing how has their body language changed, and then also using other strategies if body language isn't going to be a strategy that works for you. And by that, I mean asking questions like, are you willing to let me XYZ? Or like, can I do this? It's okay if it's a no, right? Teaching them like phrases to say where to fill in for the blanks where body language might not totally fill it in. But I also think that in general, body language is something that, yeah, people can read and don't necessarily then do with it something that is pro-social. So in that way, it's like kind of not different. As you say, like social emotional, like learning, that's part of it is it's very skills focused and practice focused, sequenced and scaffolded. And within any kind of practice, you're going to have things that are your strong points and things that you're working on. And so figuring out, okay, like, right, there are some neurodivergent folks who are really sensitive to a body language change. And so how does a person work with that? Or someone who's less sensitive to that? How are they incorporating that? And how are they like practicing both to get better at those skills, but also sharpening other skills that maybe can like compensate a little bit?
We'll wrap up because I know this is a longer conversation, but I find it so fascinating. So I just want to say thank you also for going into this with us. But I'm wondering about our neurodivergent kids who may have lower self-esteem, right? Who may be really wanting belonging, who may struggle as a result with setting boundaries. And, you know, again, going back to the very beginning of this conversation, we talked about boundary setting. I'm just wondering if you have thoughts for whether they're neurodivergent or not, but if we are parenting kids who may be people pleasers or who may put other people's needs first? How do we help cultivate in them a sense that they actually matter and that they get to be in choice in relationships with other people?
I think one of the biggest things is, again, focusing on wants, not just boundaries. And I think with neurodivergent kids, a lot of people are focusing on like, oh, I'm nervous that they're going to not understand personal space and violate someone else's boundaries. And that is important. And also thinking about, well, what do they want? And asking questions like, what do you want? What sounds good to you? How would you like to play this game? Just doing child-led play is a great thing for building self-esteem in a kid. I would also say that, and this is one of the really big challenges in teaching consent and teaching these skills to kids, is that because they're interpersonal and relational, it is important and worthwhile to, as a parent, teach your own kid. And if the people that they're interacting with aren't learning this, you can only go so far. Right? Because it's about navigating your boundaries and desires alongside the boundaries and desires of someone else. But if that someone else isn't also doing that, you're going to hit a wall at some point. And that's a hard thing to come to terms with. And why I'll plug right now my book, The Kids in Consent Curriculum, which is lessons for classrooms. And I felt really strongly about creating this curriculum because in a classroom is when they're with their peers is such a great time to reinforce these peer-to-peer skills, because it will look different with parents, and to make sure that each person in the community in the classroom is looking out for themselves and looking out for the other throughout. And so I think, teaching the skills at home, focusing, if they're all about what other people want, it sounds a little funny, but like pushing them to figure out what they want, sitting in the silence until they think of something, or using creative strategies to get them to think a little bit more. And the child-led play can be huge. And then looking for programs, or hopefully access is a hard one, but hopefully finding teachers and communities where these values are reinforced is going to be a big part of it.
That's great. Thank you. I'm just wondering if you have something for listeners who want to really get curious about their family and their relationship with their kids. And are they practicing consent values in their home? Was there like a question or a challenge that you would pose to them to get curious about after listening to this episode?
Yeah, I have a little activity that parents can try. It works different for younger kids, but write out a bunch of choices that a kid makes throughout the day, meaning what clothes they wear, what time they go to sleep, how they get to school, what they eat for dinner. And talk with your kid about, are these things that parent mostly has decision about, or that kid mostly has decision about? And what I mean by that is like what you wear to bed. It's like, yeah, kid mostly has decision about that. Obviously, if the kid's like, I want to put on a heating blanket that stays hot the whole night, like that's a safety issue and parent will have to intervene. But generally, it doesn't matter what a kid wears to bed. Kid mostly gets to decide. Whereas like how kid gets to school, that's probably mostly a parent decision. And what's great about this activity is that kids recognize that it's important for parents to have certain choice over certain things. They know it and they say it. And then you can kind of refer back to that of like, this is the decision that I do have quite a big say in. And I still want to hear your voice and maybe I can integrate it. But right, like I do have a say that you go to the doctors. This is a big parent decision. But it also gets the kid to see how many decisions they mostly get to be in charge of. And kids often feel like they don't get choice. And so this can be a nice thing for empowering that. And if you have a disagreement with your kid about who mostly gets to make that choice, this can be a great time to talk about it. Of like, what do you mean by this is mostly your choice? Tell me more about this. And this will give you a sense of how they understand choice in their home life with you, and can help like establish some like guidelines. But mostly it's not about what the outcome is. It's mostly about what the process is of, again, as you said, like getting curious is that will kind of show you what is their understanding of where their choice lives.
I love that. Well, Sarah, I just want to say thank you. This has been such a fascinating conversation. I took so many notes, but I just really appreciate everything that you shared and the work that you do. I think it's so important. I'm really glad our paths have connected. So is there a place you want people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me at comprehensiveconsent.com or on Instagram at comprehensiveconsent. My book is The Kids and Consent Curriculum, available basically wherever books are sold. I work with PTAs, with middle and high schoolers, with teacher training is a big one. I don't myself actually go into classrooms of littles because they don't know me, and it's not going to be worth the time. It's much better if I'm, talking to the teachers and the teachers can reinforce that. That's where you can find my work, and hopefully we can spread some of these ideas and get more of this autonomy back to the kids. It's where it belongs.
That's awesome. Thank you. And listeners, as always, I will have links in the show notes page for all the ways you can connect with Sarah and the other things that came up in this conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. To learn more about today's guest and the resources we talked about, check out the extensive show notes page on Tilt Parenting. There you'll find key takeaways, links to all the resources mentioned, and even a full transcript of our conversation. Just go to tiltparenting.com/podcast and select this episode. If you're looking for personal support from me and connection with the phenomenal community of parents raising neurodivergent kids, join us in the recently rebooted Differently Wired Club. The new Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Go to tiltparenting.com/club to learn more. The Tilt Parenting Podcast is hosted by me, Debbie Reber, author of Differently Wired and the founder of Tilt Parenting, and was edited by Andrea Curtis Amasquita. To support this show, please join my Patreon campaign where you can set up a small monthly contribution. Just go to patreon.com/tiltparenting to learn more. If you want to follow Tilt on social media, you can find us at @tiltparenting on Instagram and Facebook. And lastly, please take a minute to leave a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. That helps this show stay visible so others can find it more easily. And that's all for this week. Stay safe, stay well, and take good care. And for more information about any of the parenting resources Tilt offers, visit tiltparenting.com.